Okay. Give me just a second to, hold on. Okay, that should be working now. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me all right. I just turned on some Bluetooth. Okay. Cool. All right, so we're doing integrated reasoning. It is only, yes, there's only one theme per day. Okay, integrated reasoning stuff. Let me give you the copyright notice again. And a little bit of background on integrated reasoning. So this is a part of the test that has been around now for 4 years and more than half. So it's almost 5 years old, which means that the validity of scores on this test is supposed to be 5 years, meaning that's how long your scores count, and it's also how long the data are supposed to remain statistically significant relative to other people. The point is that integrated reasoning is going to have its 5th birthday pretty soon. I want to say it is in June, early June. And once it is 5 years old, they're probably going to pretty soon make some decisions about what happens to it. Like, if it correlates well enough with people's business school success, then they're almost certainly going to make it less of a sideshow and more of a part of the current test. They might even make it one score that it is part of. If it turns out to not correlate very well to business school, then they will throw it out. But so far, the data seem to indicate that it does correlate. And on top of that, there are people in a couple of professions. There are professionals in some areas who specifically want to see these scores for hiring. Like in consulting, a lot of the recruiters for the big consulting firms who are hiring post-MBAs are, they've said that they want to see IR scores, among other things. So that's another reason that it will probably not go away. So just keep an eye on it. If you're applying to business school this year, round 3, then integrated reasoning is still not that much of a thing for you. But if you are applying at any point after that, there's a very good chance that it will matter more than it does now. So just be aware of that. Keep an eye on it. Look out for GMAC to see if they make any announcements one way or the other about changes in the test and so forth. Here's the copyright notice. These problems are all from the free GMAT prep. They are copyright GMAC. And all right, let's go ahead and get into it. So this is some of these, as you may or may not know, some of these problems have things that you can click through. In fact, a lot of them do. A lot of them have manipulable data or text, meaning either you can click through a bunch of paragraphs, which is kind of annoying as opposed to just scrolling through it, but that's how they do it. And then sometimes you can sort tables just like you could with an Excel sheet. But as a result, well, because these are not, there's no way to get all 30 of you guys to sort things at the same time. So in those cases, I tried to collect everything on the screen, and so the result sometimes is that it looks very cluttered. Like here's the first problem. This is the first problem, which means that it might take you a little while to be able to answer it. But, okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to change your polling for the moment back to green checks and red X's. So what you're going to see is this, because there's too many possible combinations of answers to do this with multiple choice. So for the moment, what I want to do, because this is basically 3 different questions that are independent of each other. So you should see these options, instead of the A, actually you should see a green check and red X area. What I want you to do is give me the green check in this area when you are done with the problem. And then when enough people are finished, then we can discuss and we can start polling individual parts. So check, pick the green check, please, when you are finished with this problem. Go for it. Okay, I got some check marks from about half of you, but remember what time management means on this test, and it kind of means the same thing that it always does, which is really good time management has nothing to do with minutes or seconds or any other unit of time. Time management is really just knowing when you are stuck and then quitting when you are stuck. So if you, give me that red X if you are genuinely still making progress on this problem and you like actually are certain that you will get this right if you keep going. If not, then we're going to stop. Okay, so no one's giving me a red X. I mean, remember, this is, especially integrated reasoning, you don't, I mean, it's actually like the rest of the test in the sense that there's no point in struggling to get every problem. I mean, you don't, even though integrated reasoning is not adaptive, the scoring is still such that you will get the highest mark if you can still get the highest score if you get a couple of these wrong. So it's like the rest of the GMAT, it is still very much not for perfectionists, which is kind of like the vibe that the whole test has, really. But yeah, okay, let's discuss. So here's the way we're going to do this. I'm going to clear out your green checks, and then we're going to go one at a time. And the green check is going to be the yes vote, and the red X is going to be the no vote. And let's see what you give me. So for this one, give me a green check or a red X. Okay, there's 25 of you. I only have 15 votes. Should give me something. First line. Okay, let's see. So far, there are 12 yeses and 6 nos. Okay, second line. Give me a green check or a red X. Okay, and there are 26 of you. I only have 17 votes. So give me something, please. All right. So far, there are 15 yeses and 4 nos. What about this line? Green check, red X. Okay. Again, a few of you are not voting, but there are 4 no's and 4 yeses and 15 no's. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this. There are solid majorities here, which are actually the correct responses, but let's make sure that we discuss what this is. So, okay, let's talk about it. First thing we got to do, I mean, you may or may not know this, but when there are large blocks of text like this, ordinarily you get more than one question that has to do with them. In fact, you will always. I think they usually give you 3 or 4, something like that. So they're not going to make you go through this much text in order to answer one question. I mean, sometimes, in fact, in a lot of cases, they might make you go through very large tables of quantitative data to answer a single question. But of course, the point is that nobody reads a data table. Now, the question is, what do you do with data tables? Like here is, let me show you a data table that they use for one of the other questions that we may get to today and may not. What's a data table? I mean, if you haven't started a problem yet, tell me in the chat box, like, what do you do with this data table? Like, what's the only thing that makes sense to do with it when you first look at it? Like, how long do you spend looking at it, and what do you look for? Go ahead and tell me in the chat box. Yeah, pretty much what these, I don't know how to pronounce all these names, but I think it's Guilherme and El. Yeah, these are pretty much the idea, right? Like, you try to determine how it's organized, get to skim it and get an idea of the contents. The point, though, is that, I mean, it would seem utterly ridiculous to try to read all the data in the table. I mean, that's actually kind of a funny idea if you think about it. Like, trying to read the data as though it were a book. I mean, you would never do that. Because, you know, maybe you're going to have specific data to go in there and look for later once you have a question. But when you're given the data table, like, you would, I mean, obviously nobody would ever try to read it. And like, yeah, line for line, the way that you would read a text or a paragraph or something like that. Instead, what do you do? Well, it's what these respondents said. You just determine how it's organized. I mean, I'm going to be annoying and I'm going to cross off try to, because I don't think that someone could really fail to do that. So, I mean, you can definitely determine how a table is organized, which is, you know, I'm being stupid, but you get it. And then, yeah, skim it, get an overall idea of the contents. This is the point. So smiley face if this is pretty much what you think when you think of looking at a data table. All right. So here's the deal. Where people go wrong with the text excerpts is they treat every single piece of text as though it were something you have to read all the way through. And that's really the problem, because no. I mean, okay, the point of the integrated reasoning section is very specifically to present you with a whole bunch of information, most of which is irrelevant. That's what this section is. That is the point of it. That is the entire reason that this section is a thing. If you think about it, if you think about the rest of the problems on the test, they don't really do that. Like, you will never get a quant question where there is irrelevant information. Nor will you really in a critical reasoning question. I mean, if you have to reason something out, you pretty much have to use everything they tell you. So this is why they created this new type of thing. I mean, it's also because you're kind of mixing critical reasoning and quant, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because, unlike the quant section, they give you loads and loads of irrelevant information. And this is also why the consulting firms, by the way, are interested in this, because consultants have to do a lot of sifting through large amounts of information and figuring out small numbers of things that are relevant. So the key, though, is that this is the way that you should also, when you're presented with a text excerpt for this, the integrated reasoning, you should do the same thing with that. Aha. Yeah, we got some confirmation there in the text box that there are the big 5 type of consulting firms are totally all about that. Because, I mean, you know, like, no consultant would ever be handed exactly what they need to solve a problem, because if they were, they wouldn't need a consultant. That's kind of the point, right? So that's the thing. So you could really just look at how it's organized and get an idea of the contents. So let's take the text excerpts that are on this problem, and let's do that. There they are. And again, the goal right now is to just determine, I mean, you don't need to answer this question, that's not the point, but how many of you actually read all the words and even maybe took notes on them? If you did, that's a mistake. Know that. That's not what you should do. If you did that, you spent a whole lot of time that will have zero marginal benefit. So let's just look at what's in these things. Just like a data table. Don't read it. Don't make rules for how much to read either. That's the other thing. Like when I say this to people, sometimes they're like, okay, well, give me a rule for how much text to read. Or like, should I read the first sentence? Should I read the first 10 words? Should I read the top of each paragraph? It's like, don't do that. Like, use your intuition. Like when you look at this data table, you probably don't need rules for what to look at and what to not look at. You just kind of look at it. And you're like, okay, well, there are a bunch of things that people grow and sell. And then there's like rankings and percentages of the world. And this is going to be for some country. I mean, you can't see what country it is right now, but it's a world rank, and there's not a list of countries, which means this list is for a single country. Okay, there you go. Here, what is this? What's this? So there's a bunch of what is, and when you do this, you should try to explain it in words that would sound normal in a conversation. Like you should probably, I mean, unless analytical techniques is a phrase that sounds so natural to you that you would not even blink if somebody said it at a dinner table. You should probably not use a phrase like analytical techniques. Yeah. I mean, if you, okay, fine. Like if you majored in something like pharmacology and that is totally an intuitive thing for you, then go for it. If not, though, because the problem is for everybody else, what that means is they're not really processing the words. So, like, as long as you, I mean, yeah, no, if you, same thing like the CPI, the consumer price index, which is like a measure of how much normal expenses like food and stuff cost. If you are not an economics person, you can't be like, dude, the CPI, man. But if you are, you can. If you're anyone else, you need to be like, here's how much people are paying for the cost of living. You get the idea. So yeah, this is when I say this, it's very much subject to your background. But if you would not talk with these words in a normal conversation, do not write them. Okay. This is, yeah, right. There's a bunch of different kinds of ways of analyzing things. Artifacts, stuff that they found. It's a natural history museum, so they are finding really old things, and they are trying to find out stuff about those things. So there they are. So different ways to analyze stuff. And then if you should at least look through what kind of information they tell you about it. So there are two different kinds of things for each technique. What are they? Like, what do they tell you? For each technique, they tell you at least what two things? Yeah, besides the name of the technique, they do tell you that. But besides that, they tell you what material it analyzes, and they also tell you what it tests for. That's right. So all of that is there in that sort of thing. I mean, sometimes they also tell you about names of things like machines, but considering this is a natural history museum who wants to know stuff about items, that is probably just common sense says that that's not as important. I mean, if, like, for example, you don't really care what ICP-MS stands for. You just need to know that it is. The museum doesn't care. Just like if you're going to pull money out of an ATM, you probably don't really care what ATM stands for, as long as you know that it gives you money when you put your card into it. Same sort of idea here. So, okay. So we have the 4 techniques. You have what they, so techniques, scientific technique, lab techniques, and then what stuff they're used for. And then also what information they tell you about the stuff. There you go. Okay. What is here in the chat box? So they do tell you information about the stuff, although that stuff is also mentioned here. Like they mentioned animal products are here, and metallic stuff is here, and wooden stuff and plant matter is here, and then clay. So there's nothing new mentioned here. So, but you should still at least say what they're talking about. There's a date range here. If there are numbers, you should notice them. It's kind of like if it's a data table and they're giving you data for something, then of course you should notice that. So this is probably significant. And then, so this is probably also significant. And then this is probably significant as well. And probably so is that. So notice that there's a lot of information about time, figures, periods of time in this thing. For the most part. Any questions about that? And then what about the last paragraph? Yep, this is information about budgeting. This is what the museum can afford. So in terms of which tests and how many. And then notice the way they give it to you is interesting. Like they don't do what you might think they would do, which is to give you some sort of piecemeal cost for each test. Instead, what they do is, and that's worth noting too, they give you the bulk prices or like the total price of entire collectives of testing or sets or like batches of tests. So in other words, when you see this, you should anticipate that you might have to break those batches down and see. So, but this is the cost of, for example, this entire batch. or it is also equivalent to the cost of this other batch. The point is that you don't want to notice the specifics. I mean, in this sense, it's sort of like the initial reading that you do, or at least it's sort of like the initial reading that you should do of a RC passage, sorry. When you read an RC passage, it's very much the same sort of thing, where you don't pay attention to the specifics themselves, but you do pay attention to what kind of specifics there are. So any questions about this? Smiley face, if this makes sense. Okay, so now, having noticed that, because again, you can count on the fact that they will give you more than one question about these data. If they didn't, this would be a whole different game. Like if they didn't, and I think you might even, I don't remember actually whether you can, but you might be able to skip back and forth in integrated reasoning. I still don't think you can, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Can anybody say who's taken the test recently? Can you skip back and forth? Not between questions. Okay, so it's the same as the rest of the test. Because theoretically, there's no theoretical reason why you shouldn't be able to, because it's not like the rest of the test, which is adaptive. I mean, the rest of the test gives you future items based on how you did on previous items. So obviously, that couldn't be a thing if you could skip around. But here, these 15 items or the 12 items they give you are pre-generated, so there's no theoretical reason why you couldn't. But it's interesting that they don't let you. Thanks for that. Okay, I mean, still, even if you can trust that they will give you at least a handful of questions about this stuff. Therefore, you should do this. In theory, if you got a single question, you should just be like, forget everything. Let me just look at what I need for this one question. So this is a question about the cost. Yeah, the cost of all the techniques can be shown to be in budget. So we know we're going to use this paragraph because this is about what costs can be afford. But what other paragraph are we also going to need? Given these, notice these are not tests. Yeah, like you have to, these are items, these are not tests. So you're going to have to also know which tests to use for these items in the first place. So it's almost like doing a unit conversion. It's like being given miles per hour and switching it to kilometers per second or something. So we have to convert, quote unquote, these to the appropriate tests. Okay, well, let's do that. So that's going to be in the first paragraph. The first paragraph, the first cluster of text. It's several paragraphs. This is which tests are used for which items. Okay. So two fired clay is in all of this. That's the TL test. So this is 2 TLs. This is 3 TLs. And this is 4 TLs. And then metallic things are ICP-MS. I'm just going to abbreviate that as I-M. Tin is also a metal. And then let's actually not abbreviate that as ICP-MS. And then wooden, what tests do we use for wood? You have to use radiocarbon because wood comes from trees, which are plants. I mean, by the way, that is about as much knowledge as you would ever have to have memorized for this exam. Is that trees are plants. Like, you don't need a lot of memorized information. Like the only thing you have to know for this exam that like 8-year-olds don't already know is that profit is revenue minus cost. You have to, but you guys all know that. Otherwise, the factual information you need is kind of like trees are plants, dude. So this is plant matter. So we need to do 20 radiocarbons. All right. There we go. Okay. Now what? Well, we can afford 4 TLs and 15 radiocarbons. What about ICP-MS? 40 of them, right? So notice that 4 TLs plus 15 radiocarbons is a full budget. And also separately, we know that 40 of those ICP-MS things is also a full budget. Okay, what do we not know at all, by the way? We don't know about IRMS is irrelevant because it is free and unlimited. So, but yeah. But what do we? Yeah, well, that's what I'm looking for. It's what Suzanne wrote. Like, we have no idea how much TLs cost relative to radiocarbons, and like some people will sometimes make assumptions about this that are not warranted. Like, people will assume that 4 TLs is half a budget, or that 15 radiocarbons is also half a budget. We don't know that. I mean, like radiocarbon tests might cost like 99 cents, and then the 4 TLs is almost the entire budget. Or TLs might cost $1.50, and radiocarbons are expensive. Like we don't know. So you got to keep that in mind. But notice that 2 TLs. What do we know about 2 TLs? So we actually don't even know that it's more expensive than 2 ICPs, because remember, I mean, you have to allow for possibilities. Like it's possible that TLs cost like a cent each, and that this budget is almost entirely radiocarbons. I mean, that was the whole point, is that you cannot do that. So we don't. Also, what Andley wrote is actually false, because 40 ICPs is an entire budget, and 4 TLs is not an entire budget. So 4 TLs will definitely cost less than 40 ICPs. So maybe you wrote that backwards. Yeah, notice what Arjun wrote. Aha, it's half of this part of the budget. So, like, the entire budget is 4 TLs plus stuff. So, half a budget is 2 TLs plus still other stuff. So what we do know about 2 TLs is that it is less than half the budget. So, in other words, this is less than half the budget. And then we have Yeah, and then 10 ICPs is also that is only 1/4 of the budget, which is also very clearly less than the other half. So also less than half. I mean, if two things are both less than half, then we can definitely afford them. Or you can do what Arjun did, and you can think about how many ICPs we can still afford, which is at least 20. So this is what are these decimals? I don't know what these decimals are, but these are both less than half, so we can definitely afford this. Give me a smiley face if this makes sense. Okay, let's clear out some. Let me erase that top line so they have room. Okay, the next part is 3 TLs. And we can do the same kind of analysis here. Like if you figured out the first one, then honestly you're gonna definitely also figure out the second one. Because it's basically the same reasoning. So 3 TLs is less than 3/4 of the budget. Oh, that's all we know about it. Like it could be 2 cents less than 3/4 of the budget, but we know that it's less than 3/4. And then ICPs is 40, so this is exactly 1/8 of the budget. So, oh, okay, Hank, you're doing the second part. Got it. I mean, less than 3/4 plus 1/8 is definitely less than one budget, so this is also doable. Give me a smiley face if that makes sense. And then for TLs, so the problem is that I mean, in fact, this is definitely not affordable. And this probably should have been the most straightforward part, although there were still a few people who got this incorrect. We could only afford 4 TLs and 15 radiocarbons. So the extra 5 radiocarbons here are explicitly not affordable. This is not even, we don't know if it is affordable. You could actually prove that this is not affordable. Less than 3/4, it's the same, Guillermo, it's the same reasoning that we have here. Like 3/4 of your budget would be 3 TLs plus other things. So it would, I mean, here we can, it's the same sort of, you can just append that down here. Also, 3/4 of the budget is 3 TLs plus whatever is 3/4 of that other stuff. So 3 TLs is still less than 75% of the budget. And then you smiley if that makes sense. If it doesn't, then go ahead and type what doesn't make sense about it. Okay. And then that I mean, this one definitely not, because it is explicitly more stuff than we can afford. So yes, no. All right. There's another question that I'm going to give you of the same type of information. If you were doing the integrated reasoning, you would never get both of these questions. You would just get one or the other. Like, they're never going to ask you the same thing in 2 different items, but there are 2 of them in the practice batch, so I'm going to give you the other one. So take a look at it. This is it. It's actually the same question. We want to know if we are within budget again. 3 yes or no's. This should not take you long at all, because it is exactly the same type of question that we just did. Again, I mean, you wouldn't, obviously you would not get both of these questions on the actual thing. still. Give me a green check when you are done. Okay, most of you are done. If you are explicit, give me a red X if you are actually still working and it is productive work. Probably not, but one person. Okay, take another maybe 20 seconds. Okay, let's get a move on here. The same thing on each line. We are going to do green check if you like it, and for yes, and then red X if you don't. Okay, first line. A green check or a red X. Okay, so there's 6 yeses and 14 yeah, for this one so far. All right, what about this line? Okay, this one is a pretty overwhelming majority. There's still a bunch of non-voters. I mean, there are 30 of you, I only have 20 votes. So give me a green check or a red X. Okay. It turns out the gold does not affect the first one anyway. So even if you miss the gold, it shouldn't matter. And the bottom one, give me a vote for the bottom one. Okay, again, pretty solid majority here. There's some non-voters, but so let's just dash through this so we can move to something else with the same text. 2 bone implements is 2 of those are animal products. So we need IRMS, that's free. I mean, in other words, animal things are free. So animal, teeth, or bones, these don't cost anything. So this is not relevant because IRMS is included in the package. So we don't even have to pay attention to bone. And we also don't need to pay attention to bone down here. So this is basically 5 TLs. The problem is, as we noted last time, we don't know how big of a chunk of the budget this is. This is 4 TLs is 4 TLs and 15 radiocarbons. And like, if the radiocarbons are really cheap, then we might not be able to afford a 5th TL test. Like, we don't, you know, like if the radiocarbons are only 2 or 3% of the budget total, then we definitely can't afford a 5th TL test. So this is, we don't know if we can afford this. I mean, unlike the one that was a no on the previous slide, we can't prove that this is unaffordable. We just don't know. Give me a smiley face if that makes sense. And the question is, can the cost be shown to be within budget? So select yes only if you can actually prove that it is within the budget. So in other words, if it's unaffordable, then you vote no. Make sure that you check this out before you start picking answers to these things. So definitely unaffordable, then that's no. And if it's I don't know, that's also a no. I mean, it might be, you know, like, they might ask you a question like, if these are definitely over budget, then vote a certain way, otherwise don't. In that case, something like number 1 would go the other way. So you have to be really careful about it. But we don't know if we can afford that. 7 wooden statues is plant matter is the radiocarbon. So this is 7 radiocarbons. And then we have 20 ICP-MS tests. So 20 ICP-MS tests is exactly half a budget. And 7 radiocarbons is less than half of 15. So that is definitely less than half the budget. So this is exactly half, and this is definitely less than half. Smiley if that makes sense. So these are definitely affordable. And then 15 wooden statues is just 15 radiocarbons. So we know that 15 radiocarbons is within budget. Because we can afford 15 radiocarbons plus other tasks. So this is no problem affording that. So no, in this case, it's I don't know, yes, and yes. But the way this question is set up, I don't know is the same thing as no. Okay, if you have any questions, please type them. Let's move to another item that uses the same text. Try this one. Same thing, give me a green check when you are finished. Remember, these should not take that long now, because you don't need to familiarize yourself with the given information again. This is well, these are practice items. I mean, these are not. They may have been official test items at some point. They don't really say, but these are official practice questions from the GMAT prep software. So, okay, most of you are done. Let's look at it. For each line, give me a green check. And again, if it took you that long, like if you're just giving me a green check now, oh, sorry, I cleared out the answers here. If you're just finishing now, then that means you got to do more work up front to familiarize yourself what information is where. Okay, first line, yes or no. Have 20 votes out of 26. Okay, people are very close on this one. All right, second line, yes or no. Okay. Votes that people have voted so far are 20 and 0. This seems like it is not very bad. All right, and then what about this line? Okay, so it looks like there's just 20 people who are going to vote there, and not 26. There's 21 votes there. I got 17-4. Okay, so these two are apparently more straightforward, but the question is asking, can we estimate how old something is? That's the point. And notice this is like any range of dates at all whatsoever, even if it is a huge range of dates. I mean, if we have any idea how old something is, that is a yes. If there is no information about how old something is, that is a no. I mean, again, just make sure that you clarify this stuff too, because a big part of why people have issues with IR more than they should is they just don't really clarify what the question is asking. And a big part of why a lot of people don't is that they think they have to rush through everything. It's the same issue as with everything else. I mean, there's no need to rush this. If you feel like you need to, or if you actually run out of time, what that probably means you're doing is reading lots of stuff that you don't have to read, or even like taking notes on it. Don't do that. Okay, a yes here means there's literally any information at all about how old, about the ages of stuff. The no means there is absolutely no information about the age at all. Okay. So fired clay is the TL test, which that gives you, I mean, TL tests are given a date range here. So that's a yes. Wooden things are plant matter. Plant matter is radiocarbon, and radiocarbon has a date range. So that is also a yes. Bronze statues would use ICP MS. This is just traces of, so this according to where the sample was obtained, nothing about age. So, and there's nothing down here about age either. So this is a no. black and white. Like there's no argument for yes here. It's interesting because a lot of people put yes for this one, but nope. Like all you can find out is where the metal was dug up. Is basically the deal. There's no information here about. Yeah, uncertainty in first paragraph. What first paragraph? And what is the uncertainty? Let's see what people are typing. Okay, well, but the time factor for the wooden stuff is here. I mean, this is not time information at all, actually. Like, this is presumed means we don't know. I mean, this is not information, guys. So the 850 to 1250 thing, that is not a thing. I mean, they are guessing that those things are from that kingdom, probably by looking at them. It's kind of like if you saw some gold statue of a cat, you would probably guess that it was from ancient Egypt. But that's not data. Like, that's just you're looking at it. It looks like it came from that place in that time. So that is not data. Give me a smiley face if that makes sense. Like, presumed means you are just guessing stuff. That is what presumed is. So it is definitely not a GMAT trick. I mean, this is what this word means. Like, if someone says that, I mean, if someone says that someone is presumed innocent in a courtroom, that means that no one has shown whether they are innocent or not yet. In general, notice that more generally speaking, there are no GMAT tricks ever. Make sure that you know this. Like, there is no such thing as a GMAT trick. And if you think that there is one, it's going to complicate a lot of things that don't need to be complicated. I mean, they do not try to confuse people, ever. That does not happen. And it's important to know that it doesn't happen because you don't need to look for tricky interpretations of stuff. Like, words, no, this is definitely, because everybody definitely needs to know that this is a thing. And this is probably one of the most important things that I can tell everybody. So nothing to be sorry for. It's like the words will always mean exactly what they say, and they will always say exactly what they mean, and they will not use deceptive language. Like, that's not what they do. Because remember what this test is. Like, this is a standardized test that nobody ever gets back. Like, no one can even see the questions that they got. And still, the test is so important that it has to be respected and accepted by these top business schools. So that kind of combination requires a lot of integrity. I mean, like, honestly, if the GMAT had any trick questions ever, like even one trick question in the entire history of the GMAT, then the business schools would turn their backs on it and say, nope, we don't want this test anymore. If there was ever one single trick question, that would be enough to ruin it forever. So you can definitely trust that will not happen. You do have to be very literal, and you do have to avoid reading more things into the words. Like, for example, if you have a passage that says, this person eats chicken every day, I mean, you might think this person really likes chicken, but you can't say that. So, like, those kinds of things, that's you tricking yourself, and you have to not do that. But as far as the words, you just, whatever they say is what they say. So, like this, as far as where Yeah, and then Suzanne, also the wooden statue thing, because this is what tells you that, I mean, Suzanne's also making a valid point, which is that the radiocarbon will just tell you how old the wood is, but not necessarily when they made the wooden stuff. And that's why you also have to use this. That's Suzanne's good point. You have to combine these. Smiley face if you guys see what Suzanne is talking about. That's important, because otherwise, if they didn't tell you this part, then you would not, this would be a no. Because then you would just know that's how old the wood is, but not how old the wooden statue is. Fired clay pot, you don't need to combine stuff because the TL is not, the TL is since clay was fired. So that's why this is a thing. Okay, any questions? But even that is pretty much more subtle than what you get. I mean, these questions are surprisingly black and white. You just have to find the tiny bits of information that are actually relevant. But for the most part, even that is, you might get one question where you have to make that level of distinction. But for the most part, you don't. So, yeah. All right, let's look at another item. I have two more items that use the same data here, use the same text passages. So let's look at this one. See if we can get through both. Okay, this is just A, B, C, D, E. So let me give you those options. And, okay. Please pick A through E here. Please do not type A through E in the chat box. Okay. All right, let's talk about it. Let's go through this really quickly. Let me go through this one fast. I can probably throw one more up there. Let's just fast forward. Most people have this, some people don't. Let's take a look. We want to look at the bead. Make sure that you know what we are interested in. We are not interested in the box. at all. So, yeah. Also, it contains river sediment. This is obviously not really going to help us. So, in theory, the box could, for example, the box has to be, I mean, we don't know about the box either. We don't care about the box. Because the box could be older than the bead, the box could be younger than the bead, the box could come from a different place than the bead came from. So the box is also irrelevant. So something to do is common sense. I mean, this you can just eliminate by pure common sense, because there's no way that you could ever date something to find when it was put into a box. I mean, I could have done that this morning. Like, you have no idea. So, pure common sense, this is wrong. It's not like that makes sense. And there's no way that lab tests are going to tell you when someone put something in something else, because that could have happened at any point. Okay. This stuff, vegetation patterns, we definitely don't know, because clay is just, the only thing we can test for clay is how old it is. So that is not something, we don't know. We don't know anything about location. We just know age. So anything about where, we don't know. And again, even if we can determine the location where the box was made, that doesn't help us, because there's nothing stopping people from putting clay from one place into a box from another place. So we don't know anything about location. We don't know anything about location. And we don't know anything about location. Like B, C, and E are all location issues. So those are all incorrect for the same reason. But we do know the range of dates for the manufacturer, because we can test clay to see how old it is. So give me a smiley, if that makes sense. Okay. Well, actually, I think we, let's see if we have any time to do one more of these. All right, tell you what I'll do. There's actually two more. If you want to hang out for a few minutes, let's do them. I'll put them on the same board. So there's one. You're going to see one right now. Go ahead and vote A through E in the multiple choice area. And then while you do that, I'm going to load the other one, and then I'm just going to basically do the fastest discussion ever, and then we'll quit. And I've got some more IRs for next time. So right now, vote on this one. And then you're going to see the other one appear momentarily. Because of the time constraint, just vote A through E, and then for the other one, I'm just going to give you a certain amount of time we're not going to bother doing the line-by-line voting because that we're already sort of over time here. And then I'm just going to explain those, and then I'm going to run. So give it a shot. Okay, let's wrap this up and let's discuss it. Notice again, the key thing you're going to find is this thing here is to have a very good idea of what the question is at. Like, do not rush the question. If you do not understand exactly what the question is asking you, then do not enter it yet. So, like which one of those pieces of information would provide the strongest evidence that the artifact was produced on the island? So what are they asking about here? This is basically just about what? Produced on Caxna. This is a location question. That is all that it is. So, and it is a location question for an artifact, any artifact. So, and radiocarbon date is clearly irrelevant. We don't care. IRMS, you got to look what it tells you, but IRMS tells you about this and this. So that's not location. I mean, and again, you're not going to have to be too vague about this. I mean, in theory, if you knew what was in a diet, you might be able to guess very roughly where some animal was from. You know, like if an animal is eating the kind of olives that grow in Spain, then it's probably from Spain. But that's too much thinking. So it's going to have to be directly location. And Caxna is the particular place. It's not just approximate, roughly, blah, blah, blah. This is a TL date, so we don't care. This is unique to a mine on Caxna. And then just to make sure that that is a location test, if you look at that, that is differ according to where. So this is precisely what we want. I mean, about 6 people chose A, which is interesting because you should have been able to eliminate A immediately. Like, they're asking you about when it or where it was produced. And this is explicitly just a date, but there were 6 people who chose this. I don't get it. But maybe those 6 people all read the question very carelessly and quickly. Whatever was the mistake, this should have been a very fast elimination. And then termination was found near a quarry is known to produce stone statues, but we don't know that was on the island. It doesn't say that. Just during the kingdom, but we don't know where the quarry is. So that leaves us with D. This one, just super quickly, for each of the following results, select yes. If based on the museum's assumptions, again, make sure that you do not over focus on words like based on the museum's assumption. They're not going to trick you. So those words just basically mean that you need to read the words that are there. And that's all they're trying to tell you. And this is not they are never going to trick you. So just make sure that you don't think they're trying to trick you. Confirms that it was created during the time of. This has nothing to do with being located in a kingdom. This is just during the time of. So notice also you're not really combining information. That's the other significant thing. In general, you don't do that on IR. You are still finding like one thing at a time. You're just finding one very incredibly specific thing at a time. This is age only. So element ratios don't tell you anything about time. IRMS, nothing about that. So this is a no. Fired clay jug dated to this thing. You still need to check because to confirm that it was in that time, you have to be able to completely narrow it to that time. So this is a strong standard. If you look at this, though, the period is 1250 to 850, and TL is plus or minus 100 years. So this is 1050 BC plus or minus 100 years. So that's 1150 to 950. That's definitely within the period that we want. So that's a yes. And then ratios of trace metals, that's also where, not when, if you look at the paragraph for that test. So that is also irrelevant. And this is a no. So no, yes, no. So, all right, we are over time. Let's quit and gonna do some more integrated reasoning next time because I have some more items. But just notice that it's all about that initial reading that you do, and you really want to make sure that you approach the text blurbs the same way that you would approach an actual data table. And if you would not read all of the stuff in the data table, then don't read it in text form either. All right, let's quit. Turn off the recording. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night.